Guys, welcome to Never Legends podcast. I have South Lakes basketball tonight. It's funny because I had TC Williams football on Sunday, and tonight South Lakes. I just keep running into these buzzsaws. I got to do some more Robinson material, obviously, but South Lakes has been open about 45 years, I believe, and I think in that time there's probably been 45 Division I players out of that school. It's just an amazing amount of talent that's come out of there. And tonight I want to try to find out what the secret is. Why did all these great ball players come out of South Lakes, which is obviously Reston, Virginia. So with us today, we have Lonsdale McCallum. He's a 95 South Lakes graduate. We got Jon Lewis, who is a 87 South Lakes graduate. Troy Allen, who was a 94 South Lakes graduate. I got Quinn Harwood back with us again. He's 92 graduate. We got Joey Byrd, who was a 93 graduate. Brian Allen, the eldest statesman of the group, who was 85. And then Rob Robinson was 89. Thanks for coming, guys.
89. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, represent.
Rob, can I get one of those?
Yeah, how do you get one of those, Rob?
Stop
holding out on us.
Yeah. So when you think about Reston and South Lakes, in the early 70s, there was one real city in the area, and that was a city school in the area, and that was TC Williams, and they played against Northern Virginia schools, and there wasn't a whole lot of diversity in the rest of the county. You had historical Black neighborhoods in South Arlington, Wakefield. You had Bailey's Crossroad, the kids went to Stewart, and now Justice. Down Route 1 corridor, we had Mount Vernon. There were some African-American families in Groveton. And then you had pockets through the rest of the county in Herndon, and Vienna, and Fairfax area where I grew up. There was the Zion Drive area. So, but there was very little diversity. And then mid to late 70s, Reston, a planned city came in, and they really brought different socioeconomic groups, different races. And they all, in the same area. And it was a huge success in a lot of different ways. I mean, you have what would now be $1 million homes down the street from public housing. That just wasn't done in Northern Virginia. And what South Lakes was able to take advantage of was this great diversity and put together some really historic sports teams, and especially basketball teams. So I was going to try to get a chronology of this, and I was looking at this today in 1985, and that was Brian's senior year. You guys went to the regionals and you lost to Robinson. 86 and 87 were kind of light years. In 89 and 90, you guys go to the state tournament. 92, 93, 94, you go to the state tournament, and you also won, I think, 4 regional championships in that time as well. It's just an incredible run of success. And I forgot to mention a lot of it was due to Coach Wendell Byrd, who did such a great job with you guys. So anyway, I thought we'd go around. We'll go in chronological order. So the oldest first. I was going to start with Brian Allen. Brian is the guy that I played against. I played at Robinson, class of 84. We scrimmaged South Lakes, and back then Jon Lewis was the coach. Brian was one of the smoothest shooters you'll ever see in a time before the three-pointer. He would just dribble down. He wasn't necessarily going that fast, and all of a sudden he just pull up out of nowhere and shoot this nice three-pointer. Had a great career at Penn State as well. So Brian, why don't you start off a little bit? Tell us about your background, about where you played especially where you played your rec ball, siblings that played. There's one sibling on the call on this Zoom as well, and a little bit about your high school career as well.
Well, what I didn't know, you didn't know, is that we didn't even move to Reston until 82 when I was in 10th grade and Troy was going into second. And it was really just a happenstance, because we lived in Texas, and back down there, football and baseball are king. And I had made the decision, because my high school there was really big. They had a freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior basketball team. So I was not going to play basketball after my freshman year had we stayed in Texas. Then I tell people Pops was running from the law. That's why we moved so much. But he just, because he was getting promotions, he moved to Fairfax, which is where Mobile's headquarters was. And South Lakes was a basketball school. And he wanted me to get involved and meet people. So he put me in the camp where I met Coach Lewis, Coach Byrd, and even Coach Dunn, who was at George Mason at the time. And Casey Veach was probably the first guy I met, open gym, the summer, South Lakes. And he was the backcourt mate with Michael Jackson. So I met both of them within the first 2 weeks I was in Reston, and very quickly decided that I didn't like the 2-a-days in August in football and the cold football at the end of the season. And I was going to choose basketball and baseball. So it was just just random that we ended up in Reston, Troy and I. I think the other thing was just the youth basketball was so strong. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that I was a good athlete who played basketball. And then when I met Mark Seneca in Summer League, that's when I decided I wanted to be a good basketball player. And between Mark and Michael Jackson, who's like my mentor, that made me into a basketball player. And then you throw Coach Lewis in there, who his coaching method fit my personality. So he had me believing, I could conquer the world. So I think just moving there into a basketball community, and what I didn't know until I was probably in my 50s, 51, 52, is Pops intentionally, when we moved there, looked at the schools and the diversity. And it came down to TC, Herndon, and South Lakes. And South Lakes won because it was probably the most diverse, but it had a nice basketball program. So that's how we ended up in Reston. So it was his master plan, but it definitely wasn't mine. And I think, and Troy could probably speak on this better than I can, but I think one of the best things about it was his pullout game was many years apart. So whatever I was doing, anybody that was Troy's age didn't know who I was. So Troy was able to carve out his own niche, because other than his close friends, nobody knew me by the time he got to high school, and probably was more influenced by Grant, Rob, and those guys playing with Joey and Quinn than he was me. But yeah, it was, the grand experiment worked, and it's just amazing what was able to be accomplished. And I just think, just real quick, my senior year, Troy was talking about chemistry earlier, and I just think I was robbed of that. We didn't have any chemistry in my senior year, and Mark Seneca got hurt, and my two favorite plays ever in high school involved Mark. One was my junior year. He got a steal when we were down one, and he tipped the ball. I got it, just turned around, shot the jump shot. And then the other time was against you guys when you guys were up, and he tipped the ball, or I tipped the ball, and he got the layup. Sorry about that, Joe. I didn't mean to bring that up, but yes, I did. But Mark was a far superior basketball player than me, and he made me up my game. And he also twin branches, wasn't twin branches when I was a sophomore. And then my junior year, that summer, I had, two guys move in with us, with Troy and I and Chris, my other brother. And what was the name of we used to play Newbridge, and it was too small. So we had to go to a bigger court. And the summer of my junior year, we all started, because at the time, Twin Branch was a lot more older guys than sometimes high school. And then, like the Willie Pages, the guys that were a year older than I, and Vince Howard, who lived with us, we just needed a bigger court. And that's how Twin Branches, it went from Newbridge to Twin Branches. So that's my perspective as the old guy, is that I just kind of taken the baton that Michael passed off and just tried not to embarrass number 32 until Grant could take it over and own it. But it was, and Jerome Scott's brother, Danny Scott, was probably one of the most influential guys to me too. When we beat Langley in the district finals, he D'd up the older Galliani brother and was all up in him the whole game. And that's how we won the game. And that defensive effort is how I transformed my game when I got to college. So shout out to Danny Scott.
It's funny, Brian, certain games scar a school. I mean, you guys had those games, you still think, but maybe the Wakefield game, I'm not sure, 1990. But that game when you beat us in the regional 85, I'd graduated, and they were much better, the guards they had, as you knew, but they had two all-state players, Chris Warren and Jeff Bowling. Jeff ended up playing at Air Force, led the WAC in assists. And they had those guys that formed the 87 team that almost beat Alonzo Mourning in the state final, and they were beating you guys by 12, 13, I think late, and you guys came back, and we still talk about that game. So
Sorry, man.
Yeah. So anyway, Jon, first of all, Jon, I want to thank you for all your help and help get the Facebook group set up and getting this ball rolling. I understand you were a ferocious point guard. You know, you played hard, made the pass, and you always played really good players into the game. So you were a nice guy to play with. So why don't you go next? Tell us a little about how you guys ended up at Reston and about your years up until your high school, and then maybe a little bit about your high school career.
Absolutely. I think I probably go back the longest in Reston. We moved there in 1971. So it was brand new.
Yeah.
We lived in a house next to where Terracet Elementary is now. But at the time, there was no Terracet, no Langston Hughes Middle, no South Lakes High. It was all just trees back there. So these were the early days. Terracet opened, and you really got a taste of what Reston was just by going to the after-school program there. So my little neighborhood elementary school, and I lived in a single-family home. My dad's a lawyer, whatever, right? But like you said, there's diversity in the housing all around us. So the school was diverse. And the after-school program at Terracet in like 1977 was run by Steve Shepard, who played for Maryland, you may remember.
Yeah. And
a year or two later, of course, the legendary Mr. Kitchen, was over there too. So there was like this, I'm just this 7-year-old, redheaded kid, and there's like basketball being played across the street from my house. Kids are serious. The coaches are knowledgeable. And I think that's, when I think about like how did this basketball thing kind of happen, this was all over town. There were open gyms, and there were people there who weren't just coming in and horsing around. Meanwhile, South Lakes opens in whatever it is, 78. I think it's a year or two before we even have a varsity team. But then it's like 79, 80, and Mike Jackson's over there playing. And like, you got this incredible team. I could go watch, I'm a 10-year-old, walk in and watch these guys just ball out. And like, from the day the school opened, it was South Lakes basketball was something to see, and I know for me, I was, pretty short. I was just an okay youth player. I mean, I wanted to be part of that. And then the years go by, and hanging around Newbridge and trying to get on the court, and Mark Seneca's holding court, and then Twin Branch, and like, you hope somebody took you for the next game, and if you didn't win, you were waiting for an hour. Like that was the culture. And then watching BA, I do want to say I was there to witness what he and his teams did, which was impressive. And then, quite frankly, my junior and senior year, Jerome was a sophomore, and we were solid. We were lucky to hold down the district title. We didn't have anybody over 6'2". For the record, I want to say that team beat the Twin Towers of the Palmer brothers in the district semifinals. And if anyone, I'm sure you guys remember Gerald Price,
Yep.
Mike Watkins, and Joey Cotton.
Yep.
All three of those guys, 6'2", maybe 6'3", they went and took it to the Palmer brothers and beat them. And it was one of the, there's no tape of that game, but I'll never forget it. The next year was Grant's freshman. So we won the district that year and probably lost the first round of the regionals. And then the next year was really was expected to be a down year. Not being self-deprecating, but my class in particular was not the strongest. When we were on JV, we were 0-8 at one point, which at South is like, you want to wear a bag over your head at school. I mean, but that's not a good thing to be in South Lake. But our senior year, we had a couple of seniors, me, Grant was a freshman, and Jerome was the man. And again, we managed to win the district, so Coach Byrd could keep that flag up there. And we won on a last-second foul shot. Some of you might remember that. So that was our big highlight.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jon. Well, Rob Robinson. So you reminded me kind of a player, like kind of a Harvey Horace Grant kind of player, real good around the glass, slash, had a nice pop-up jumper. And you're kind of a late bloomer in that. People didn't really know who you were exactly. And all of a sudden, your junior and senior year, you really came on strong. And then you had a tremendous career at Niagara. You scored a lot of points. You really, if people didn't know who you were, they really should have known, because you had just a tremendous college career. So why don't you go next? Tell us kind of where you grew up and how you got into ball, and maybe a little bit about your high school career.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on. My family, we moved here in Reston. I think it was 1976. I was born in Alexandria, down Mount Vernon Avenue. You familiar with down Richmond Highway?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of family members down there. So like all Fort Hunt school, I probably would have went to Fort Hunt if I would have stayed there, but we moved to Reston, and I went to Dogwood local elementary school, went to Langston Hughes, and then of course South Lakes. But I got into basketball when I was about 11 years old. Mr. Kitchen got me into basketball. I saw Mr. Kitchen. Actually, I was younger than that. What am I saying? 11? I think I was maybe 9 or 10, because they started the Reston Youth League.
Yeah.
And that's where I really got into ball. I mean, Mr. Kitchen, Coach Greene, Irv Greene, and Bob Dim. You guys remember Bob Dim? Robert Dim? He was one of the co-founders of the Reston Youth League. So, those guys put the whole thing together. What they did was they went to pretty much every neighborhood in Reston and, put together a league, charged everybody maybe $10 for the league to get it started, gave us t-shirts, and started balling. I mean, we were playing outside, all over Reston, outside. And where I lived on Glade, and Michael Jackson lived across the street from us. And also like the Washingtons that played for South Lakes. I don't know, Brian, maybe Willie Soto, but those guys play on your team?
Willie Soto was my age, but he didn't play.
He didn't play? Okay. Yeah, well, all those guys were in the neighborhood. So that's where I got my game from, like in the neighborhood. We were playing outside. Where we grew up at, it was one hoop before they built one behind the complex where I lived at. And like just watching Michael used to come over there and cook, I mean, he used to come over there and cook, and I used to watch him. And also like his brother, Teddy was a baller also. Teddy could shoot, and they would come over and play. And then one day I saw those guys with the uniform on, and I said, South Lakes. And then like my sister was part of the first class that graduated in 81. So after that, I always wanted to be a Seahawk. After that day when Michael Jackson came over to our neighborhood, and I thought that those guys in my neighborhood was the baddest on the earth, and he cooked, you hear me? And I was like, I'm balling. And that was it. After that, I lived on the court, came to South Lakes, started freshman. I should have been on that team in Jon, your team in 87. I should have been on that mob.
I want to say, just for the record, that Rob Robinson, as a 10th grader when I was a senior, you absolutely could have been a starter on that team.
Yeah, I held myself back. Blame me. And I tell all my students now, all my athletes, it's all me. But I should have been on that mob, but, it didn't turn out that way. But like our team was crazy. Like my freshman and sophomore year, I think we lost maybe 2 games. I think in South Lakes, I only lost like 4 games in 4 years or something like that. Like it was crazy. So, I got into that, just watching those guys from my neighborhood ball, seeing Mike, and then that game, I think that game that you're describing, BA, was at South Lakes where you hit that layup, wasn't it? Or who hit the layup at South Lakes to win the championship? I was at that game.
Man, my whole career is just a blur. Like
Yeah,
Julie talks about my jump shot. I don't remember that.
Somebody hit a layup at South Lakes. I can't really remember, and I apologize for that. But that moment was incredible because the gym, the neighborhood, I mean, everybody, I mean, it was like our championship. You know what I mean? Like that was like winning an NBA championship, and everybody was happy. And like, I was like, man, I'm balling, you know. And then, you know, Grant came out of nowhere, but like we used to play, you know, we used to play ball together on all the outdoor courts, all of us, you know. We had our stack, you know. My freshman JV year was all of us and just add Grant, because Grant played alongside of us, you know. And like Twin Branches, Newbridge, all of that. You're right. If you lose, you sit for an hour plus.
Long time.
And if you don't get picked, you might as well just leave, you know?
Yeah.
And so our goal was we was going to take down all the playgrounds in Reston and Nottoway. And that's what we did from 87 until I went to college. And epic battles between South Lakes guys and Flint Hill guys at Nottoway.
Yeah.
You know, so that was our thing. And I think that alone built our chemistry as that whole, like that 89 mob. And then us catching up to Grant when he was you know, he was a junior, senior, and then us seniors that year in 89. That's when it all just came together. Everything, all those years of playing outside on the court, you know, battling each other, going at each other, and, you know, we just went to work.
Oh, well, thanks, Rob. Well, Quinn, I know you may have to pop out of here, but are you good? Okay. So Quinn Harwood's one of these guys that I didn't know Quinn, but whenever anyone talked about him, everyone loves you. The coaches that coached against you, your teammates, you were a guy that everyone really liked. So whatever you're personally, you have that personality. People really like you. I think you pay well. But anyway, I know you had a serious injury in high school that kind of held you back a little bit, but you ended up having a good senior year, I believe, and great career at Davidson. And now you're a motivational speaker, I believe, an inspirational guy generally. So why don't you go next?
Yeah, thanks, Julian, for having me on again. This is a lot better than the first time, because the first time I was on, I had to talk about that regional team in '91, and that podcast sucked for me, man. That was a tough pill to swallow, right? But so this was a lot more favorable, and it's really good to catch up with the fellas and see the boys up in the house. But look, my story, I grew up in Jersey, and like you talk about diversity, Jersey's like, I grew up with Vinny, Snooki, and like the Godfather people, right? There was no diversity. And so to get to Reston, where my dad had got promoted, we moved there in '86. And so in '86, we moved there, and it's a little different world, different culture. But we went to those summer camps that I think, you know, Rob had mentioned, Brian had mentioned. I went to those summer camps, and it was like, man, it created a thirst. And I mentioned this before the podcast, but really '88, when like that championship team where you see that familiar clip where, you know, Jerome throws that alley-oop to Grant and dunks it. I'm in the stands in 8th grade playing select basketball, and I'm excited. I'm pumped. I'm like, man, that's where I want to be. You know, I want to be out on that court. And the competitive fire was there, and the legacy was just phenomenal of people that had that high mindset, that high altitude of where they want to go. And it helped me out a lot, because when I got to Virginia, man, I just didn't hang around with the right people. Like by the time I was in 8th grade, I don't even know anyone knows this, but I was in juvie hall. Like I had to go in front of the judge for doing some stupid stuff with some stupid people. And it was like that wake up call. I'm like, man, I didn't really think I'd see myself like that, but there I was. There's too much Jersey still baked in me was the problem. But look, when I got there, it was people like Rob and people like Grant. I mean, I think I can recall as a freshman and like Rob walking down the hallway and giving me a dab. And I'm like, man, I'm just like this little peon freshman who can't jump over a phone book. And Rob's kind of giving me props. My sophomore year, I remember Brian Allen, I had tried to cut my own hair because at that time you wanted it brain tight. So I like tried to cut my own hair brain tight, and I screwed it up. And Brian, after he was back, I think maybe substitute teaching, he hooked me up, brought me to his house and kind of trimmed up the grill there. And I'm like, man, that's really cool. And then I remember Grant, like he was a person who wasn't into that scene. So he wasn't in trouble. It was cool to get good grades. So it kind of built this mindset that, man, like you could do more, you could be more. Like, and sports and athletics and academics could all be that spot. And then the diversity part was really awesome because some of my best brothers were diverse. Like even my college roommate in college, you know, he's a brother. And so he's Black. And so it was like this diversity thing really got baked into me. And it was really cool. It was a really cool shift for my own life. And I think about what they talk about, which is phenomenal. Like Twin Branches, I grew up about, when I was in Virginia, about 1.5 miles from there. And I can remember I couldn't drive, but I'd ride my bike. I'd ride my bike up to Twin Branches to play some ball and to hoop it up. And I can remember Will Overton. I think that may be more about maybe somewhere between you, Rob, and you, Brian. Remember the name Will Overton?
He was my closest friend.
Yeah, oh,
growing
yours,
up.
man.
Yeah.
I remember him. He would always encourage me on the court, man. He would say, man, you're on my team. And all I could do at that point is sit and shoot. Like I couldn't move. Like I had no ability. And so I would just sit and shoot. So I can remember those times in that culture built. And then as I got into high school, like my sophomore year was really pivotal for me, to be fair, Julian. I actually got Irv Greene. Everyone knows and loves Irv. He built confidence in me. He was the first one who kind of, I think, really believed in me as a player. My freshman year coach, I won't mention that name in case he listens to this podcast, but it was brutal. I mean, it was a football coach just driving us to the ground, and whatever you did and screwed up, you just screwed up, run faster, run harder. But Coach Greene gave me an opportunity to play point guard. So here I am at 6'2", 6'1" as a sophomore playing point guard. And man, he really believed that I could do it, and it built my confidence. And then by junior year, I had grown. I was like 6'6", 6'7". And now I was playing on the star-studded lineup, with, Joey Byrd. I think the year before, he might have been the sophomore or Gatorade player of the year, I think, or somewhere in there. Maybe it was his junior year or senior, his junior year or sophomore year. Obviously a loaded team stack, Troy's there. Troy rolls in as a really confident, and that's using it lightly, Troy. You weren't confident. I would say maybe a little cocky, but he needed it. That was his game, right? He walked in like, and I can remember, I'll tell you a quick story too before I stop blabbing here, but I can remember in 8th grade, Grant Hill walking down the court. Troy does this spin move and pickup and hits his jump shot. And Grant's running down the court like, that's the future. That's the future. And all I could see is Troy's head just going bigger and bigger and bigger. But it was funny, right? But Troy just had that work ethic mentality that was just fantastic fit, man, to that team. So junior year, like, man, it started to blossom. By my senior year, I went to those 5-star camps, and dudes don't even go to camps, it seems like, anymore. It's all the club circuit. And look, I did well with it. Got an opportunity to, sign a scholarship early, which I'm thankful I did my senior year. Broke my ankle. Someone my brother's friend, just in the front yard, right before his senior year started, he just thought he wanted to do some judo move on me, threw me over his ankle, stepped his leg out and threw over, cracked my ankle. So I was out for most of my senior year. But man, I can remember the fondest memory I had was that, and Joe remember this, we were the comeback kids. I remember this article, it was his junior year, and we actually just got lit up in the semifinals. We were getting lit up by Greg Williams. He banks in this 3-pointer in overtime. And like, dang, we still pull it out. We come back and win the game in the semis. And then the regional finals, we're down to Chantilly of all people. It's like, what the heck? By 13 with about 3 minutes left. And it just goes off, man. It goes down, right? We come back and we're just draped in emotion and excitement, enthusiasm. We're all pumped up. And I think that for Troy was one of his first 3 Northern Region championships. Joey, I think you won the next year too. So, man, it was just a great run, man. It was a great atmosphere, great peeps, man. Really good.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Quinn. Well, Joey, first of all, it's nice meeting you. Me and Brian used to come. Yeah, me and Brian used to come watch you play them before we go to the club, right, Brian? But
I don't know what you're talking about, man. Exactly. I was at book club. At book club.
Yeah. So Joey Byrd was the only second team parade All-American in the history of Northern Virginia. Tommy and Grant, Crawford are all 13. So you're one of the most accomplished high school players in the history of Northern Virginia. So you just had a great career. Went to Duke and then Boston University. And I'd love for you to give your background as well. But one question I've always wanted to ask you is, was it easier to come to South Lakes because Grant had all the spotlight? You can come in without having all the spotlight on you as a freshman, or did that put more pressure on you because you had big shoes to fill? So anyway, why don't you go next?
Yeah, well, I'll start. And Julian, nice meeting you as well. And yeah, man, I mean, I was fooling those parade evaluators, for a long time. To be on the second team was obviously truly a treat and something that wasn't expected. But yeah, had them fooled for a long time, man. And very nice meeting you. Thank you for the invite. Yeah, to just kind of address the first question. You know what? I was in 9th grade. I was 15 years old. I was too dumb and young and stupid to really feel the pressure, right? All I knew was Grant Hill. I didn't want to play on varsity. I think Grant tells the same story. He's like, I don't want to be on varsity. I want to go hang out in the freshman team with my friends and play with my guys, because I've been playing with those guys for years. So yeah, I mean, for me, there wasn't really any pressure freshman year. That pressure started to build as I got a little bit more notoriety, but that was the thing. I never felt that pressure. it's funny. You talk about what's the key, like why are so many successful basketball players coming out of South Lakes? I do think diversity is a big piece of it. You know, it's funny. I went to BU, I took a sociology class, and we studied Reston as a project. You know, it was one of the first planned communities. Yep. And I do think that having that diversity, that mix of, you know, cultures and backgrounds, ethnicities, you know, that was a big piece of the success, because we were all friends before we were teammates. You know what I mean? I think that really bled into, you know, the success of South Lakes basketball. Once again, you talk about, I mean, you know, you can go down from you know, you can go from Jon to BA to Quinn to, you know, to myself to Troy. It was always pass the baton, right? Next guy up. And whatever Quinn and Troy, because those are the guys I was closest with, just because Quinn was a year older, Troy was a year younger. Dale got in there his freshman year, and we kind of gave it to him a little bit as well. But really what it was we were always competing with one another. And as good as friends we were, there was always that competition there, always, you know, and I think that's really what it was. Quinn, I came on the scene and I was pushing Quinn. Troy came on the scene, he was pushing me. And then once again, I mean, you see my background. This was the picture I was talking about. This was a Friday night. This wasn't a regional final. This was a Friday night at South Lakes, you know? And so I think just, once again, I grew up a soccer player. You know, so that was always, you know, I was a soccer player hardcore until I was about 11, 12 years old. And then I knew Mr. Kitchens. I was at Whirlgate shooting jumpers with him for hours on hours. But for me, my Mr. Kitchens was Irv Greene. You know, that was the guy who really kind of, you know, that's where I kind of started, you know, start to develop the passion and the skill set to eventually, you know, have the opportunities to continue to play. But really, for me, I do remember going to South Lakes basketball games. And I don't know if I ever told Rob this, but Rob, you were my favorite guy to ever come out of South Lakes, only because I liked your bounce. I liked your hustle. I liked your grit. I mean, Grant was awesome. I mean, the guy was smooth as silk, but that was, you know, for me, it was always, you know, I was, you know, later on in my career, I played 12 years in Europe only because I worked hard. You know, and so Rob really epitomized kind of what South Lakes was to me. So I loved watching Rob play. I love watching him block shots. I love watching him run the floor, get and boom on people. So yeah, freshman year, once again, I kind of, you know, I was a soccer guy. Irv kind of, you know, started whispering in my ear, like, look, it's time to commit a little bit. And then I had guys like Troy and Mike Summey and Marcus Holland and Emmanuel Ramey and Quinn, you know, like we were friends before we were teammates. And I do think you talk about chemistry, that's where the chemistry comes from. You know what I mean? Not only we were friends, but we held each other accountable. I mean, there was more, you know, pardon my language, but ish talking in those practices that I've ever been a part of, you know, and it was all love. But there was competition, man. You know, there was always competition. That's why you talk about the shell drill. I mean, Troy and Quinn probably remember this, but I remember, you know, the name will go unnamed, but I remember Coach Byrd getting face to face on more than one occasion with several players, because once again, Coach Byrd held you accountable. You know, and I had a lot of good moments at South Lakes, but one of the ones I remember vividly was my freshman year. We were playing in the regional semis against, I don't even know who it was against. Was it Hayfield maybe?
What year was it?
I think it was 1990. Grant was a senior. I was a freshman, and I ended up having like 20. It was like the first time I'd ever scored 20.
It was you played Stewart. It was
Stewart. There it is. Yeah, and I had the leaner. It was the first time I ever had the leaner.
Yeah.
And that was like my third dunk of the game. And I came around the basket and I held my hands up to the crowd running down. Yeah. And then later on there was a foul, and Coach Bird's like, Joseph. And I knew I was in trouble at that point. He said, no Hollywoods, Joseph. No Hollywoods. And that's all it took. That's all it took. And all these guys are laughing because once again, like that for us, like that was the common denominator. Coach Byrd brought that work ethic, you know, and he made you strap it up each and every day. And regardless of how much notoriety or accreditation that I got, Quinn didn't care. He's trying to bust my butt. Troy didn't care. He's trying to bust my butt. Dale came in there and all of a sudden this guy's friggin' a freshman, you know, dunking on everybody.
Jumping out the gym.
Yeah, jumping out the gym. I'm like, dang, why can't I do that? So, you know, it's just so funny, man, because I feel like, I mean, I haven't seen these guys or talked to these guys for way too long, man. And I'm at a point in my life where it's just like, you know, time's going fast, man. I need to get back with some of these guys and go 100 miles down memory lane with these guys, talk about their kids, talk about their life experiences and all that. But it all started from, you know, once again, Twin Branches, Post Oak, Nottoway, Rob, that, oh man. And I remember going and, Quinn and Troy riding out to Nottoway, be like, yo, we got to hold fort, y'all. And I remember about Twin Branches, if you didn't get there right around 3:30, you were stuck. So like as soon as practice was over, it's like, as soon as school was over, man, you were getting in that car and you were rolling out. So, and I just don't see that anymore. I just ripped off 3-4 courts that outdoors in the summer, man, we are there. That was our evenings in the summer, playing under the lights. And I just don't see that anymore. I'm in Decatur, Georgia. The only time I saw people actually outside playing basketball was during COVID. And about a week into it, the city decided to pull down all the basketball rims, and there it went. You know what I mean? So yeah, once again, I think the camaraderie, the friendship, that's really what developed the chemistry. And I knew Rob from, once again, like my sister was Grant's year. So my sister knew Rob real well, knew Grant. So coming in, I didn't really feel the pressure. I just felt that, I needed to make sure that I was, just coming to the gym every day, working as hard as I could, because otherwise they were going to let me know, and they did. So freshman year was definitely an interesting one. One last story, and then I'll kind of pass the mic, but I was watching this was kind of the epitome of my freshman year. I was watching, I think Grant did like a Fila video or something. And it was like, one of these NBA greats, and I don't know if Fila put it on, or if the NBA did it, but there was some video of Grant, and he had scored a basket, and then he ran back and he stole the ball, and he went down and scored another basket. Well, I was 6'8", about 170 pounds at the time. I looked like a baby horse, and I changed directions too quick, too many times. And next thing you know, I just buckled. And that was right in the background. And Quinn knows this, Troy knows this, but my freshman year, man, it was not a pretty scene. And that was really, the epitome of my freshman year. It was like, I just wasn't ready. I just wasn't ready. And we lost in the States to Hampton, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, about 6-7 minutes into it, there's a guy named Aaron Mundy, who went on to be a tight end at UVA. And about 7-8 minutes into the game, Coach Byrd said, young fella, we're going to sit you for the rest of the year. And we'll get you ready for your sophomore year. You're not quite there yet. So, but it was great, man. Once again, I can go back. We could go sit down and crack a beer with each and every one of these guys, man, and be, yucking it up, and each have our own individual stories, all about, the good times and Coach Byrd and just the gym. Once again, like I said, this, the background, that was a Friday night at South Lakes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With a little go-go to get us going, right?
Yeah.
Don't believe the hype, baby. Don't believe the hype.
A little rare essence to bring us out of the locker room.
That's right.
Well, thanks, Joey.
Our song, real quick, Julian, our song coming in was Public Enemy, Enter the Terror Dome.
Welcome to the Terror Dome.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I do remember that. See, we had to shift it.
The other team, like every team, when that song come on, they'd be like,
yeah. You start running around the court, doing the layup drill, high off the glass. Yes, sir, man. Yeah, exactly. But that was like 20 minutes to go before the game, and it was still packed. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
People, that was the place to be. That was the place to be. So,
yeah. Well, let's get Troy Allen in here. So, Troy, I probably saw more of Troy's games, any other games, because I was with Brian all the time. We went to all your games. You were a very mature player. Wendell Byrd, he loves to put his freshmen, throw them into the deep end. He did the same thing with Grant. He did it with Lonsdale. Did it with Joey, and. You were ready. Your body was developed. You were a really mature player as a freshman, and it's not, all 4 years you were a contributor. You did nothing but win, and then I guess you played baseball at Penn State, I believe. Isn't that right?
No, I played baseball at George Washington.
Yeah, GW. Yeah. Okay. So why don't you go next?
Yeah. So my story is a little bit different about Brian gave you the background, but I spent summer of 86, 87, and 88, or 87, 88, 89, 3 weeks playing at Penn State, where Brian was. So I was constantly getting my ass handed to me by college kids. And so I think maybe that's where the maturity level came from. But I'm a little different than Joey in that I did feel the pressure as a freshman, primarily because of Coach Greene. He was my youth coach. And, we were running everything that South Lakes was running offensively and defensively. We were running the press, and, he was always like, you're ready, you're ready, you're ready, you're ready. And for me, I was like, all right, well, there's Grant's shoes to fill. And then I still felt people remembered Brian. So when, my time came up, yeah, I felt a little bit of pressure. And that particular team, I don't think was the best situation for me, but, we made it work. But the camaraderie that we're all talking about, it has to go back to Twin Branches, because that's where you're seeing the guys that are older than you. And like Joey said, it's pass the baton. So, when I got there, like I knew I was stepping into a dynasty, and I wanted to make sure that I, held my end of it. I don't know that I could have expected the career that I had, or that we had as a team. But I knew, with Joe being there and Quinn, my sophomore year, my game, the way I wanted to pattern it was after Rob, actually. Thinking, all right, Joey's going to take the shots. I'm going to do all the stuff that needs to be done otherwise. And so my true basketball memories start, 87, 88, 89. And Rob was the person that I was trying to pattern after. I knew I couldn't shoot like my brother, but I wanted to do everything else better. And that included cleaning the glass, playing D, and that was Rob. And so, that was sort of the role that I tried to fill for the first 3 years in high school. And then, my senior year, I had to do a little bit more of the scoring, but, Lonsdale being a freshman when our sophomore year, which was far and away my favorite team, I also wanted to make sure that he didn't feel the pressure in the same way that I did. And so, that was my man. Like he, I marveled at his ability to leap off the floor. He was young and dumb as a freshman. And, that was the right team to be on, because the guys on that team were we were a tight unit. And, for me, I think about my senior year, and the thing that drove me the most was I didn't want to have it fall on me that we didn't win that third one. That drove me a lot that year. And, we ended up getting it, but, for me, it was always trying to fill the shoes that were left in front of me. Brian, Grant, Rob, those were the guys that I always felt like I had to make sure that I was upholding those standards at South Lakes. But, I just think about the camaraderie we all had. Even, when I was in 7th and 8th grade playing pickup at the high school, Rob didn't treat me like I was an eighth grader, seventh or eighth grader. Like if I'm on the court, you get your ass handed to you like you were a high school kid. And it was the same with Grant. I tell a funny Grant story. I had decided to play baseball, and there's a tournament called the Boston Shootout.
Ooh.
And Coach Byrd would bring back all the stars to come scrimmage against our Boston Shootout team. And I hadn't been on the floor with Grant, since I was in 7th or 8th grade. And he showed up one day, and the first thing that happened was at summer camp, he pulled me out for a little one-on-one demonstration, and he hit me with this move that made me fall on my face in front of all these campers. And I still don't know how he did it, but he did it. And I ended up on the floor, everybody's laughing, whatever. Well, maybe that day or the next day we're doing, that practice for Boston Shootout. And he proceeds to abuse me like I stole something from him for the first set of games. And he was dunking so hard that he bruised his forearm. And it was like, I'd bring it up, he'd steal it, boom. Bring it up, he'd steal it, boom. And so like, at that moment, I was like, man, I'm glad I chose baseball, because I can't do this. And, it was funny to me because, you know, how many times do you get the opportunity to play against guys like Rob and Joey and Quinn and Grant that have gone on? And well, I never played against Jerome, but Jerome, my memory of Jerome is just his handle, and that dude could shoot lights out. But you know, the guys that I had exposure to, you know, I just feel like it was impossible not to make yourself better and impossible not to motivate yourself. You know, we had a dynasty, like there's no other way to say it. But we had a dynasty. When you're part of that dynasty, you know, you don't want to be the person that lets it fall. And so, you know, our senior year, I'm most proud of us winning that one because we probably weren't as talented as our previous teams, but we scrapped and we knew what we had to do. So, you know, I coach baseball and train now, and a lot of my the vibe I try and create in my gym is I'm trying to pattern it after what we all experienced. And then, you know, as far as a coach goes, up here, they don't believe in putting your best, you know, 5 out on the court, right? If you're a senior, then you get granted into, you know, your playing time. And that's not the way that I grew up. So when I was coaching at the local high school, I brought freshmen up if they were better than some of my seniors, and it pissed off a whole lot of people. But all of that stuff that I do now, a lot of it is rooted in South Lakes basketball. So,
yeah. Well, thanks, Troy.
Yep.
Well, Lonsdale, you know, we've never met. It's great to meet you. You were like the perfect high school power forward. I mean, you played hard, you cleaned the glass. I mean, a perfect teammate. You never tried to do too much. You always stayed in your lane. So I always had a lot of respect for your game. Saw a lot of your games as well.
Julie, can I stop you for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
When you're talking about him staying in his lane, let me tell you one play in particular where this did not occur.
Okay.
So we're in the
hold up. The regionals.
Yes, we're in the region. We're in the region at Robinson. I don't know how it happened, but I ended up throwing him a baseball pass. This was Joey's senior year. I ended up throwing him a baseball pass, and instead of, you know, just casually dunking it in, nobody's around him. He's a sophomore now, right? He bounces it off the floor, 360s in the middle of a regional final. He makes it, but like, who does that? Right. I mean, it was pretty as hell.
All I heard from the sideline, I heard no, yes.
I'm sorry.
So, Lonsdale, your turn, buddy.
So first, I really want to thank Joey for in trouble a lot. Joey used to whisper in my ear, "Dale, when you dunk, make sure rim." I had to hang on the rim so much. Coach Byrd used to yell at me, pull me right out the game.
Yeah, that's only because I couldn't jump on that high, so I had to hang on it to pull myself up a little bit. That's all that was. You didn't need to.
Yeah,
I was just my advice to you, though.
Yeah.
But my story is a little bit different. And I fell in love with the Royal Blue and Kelly Greene of South Lakes instantly. I started playing house league in 6th grade, and I was discovered by Coach Greene, and he's been my mentor, you know, ever since. And I think in middle school I met Troy. Also, actually I met Joey in elementary school too. I think we both might have went to Tercet. But I started meeting a lot of people that belong to the South Lakes family, and you know, we were all, you know, the camaraderie, you know, everyone was friends, and I just wanted to be a part of that so bad. So before then, I used to get in like minor trouble. I wasn't a bad kid, but South Lakes basketball gave me so much direction, gave me more focus, and even when things weren't going the best at home, I had my big brothers to take care of me, you know. So I went, you know, all through high school, didn't get in any trouble, you know, they kept me focused, and it really meant a lot to me, you know. I remember I might have been either 6th grade or middle school, and I just, you know, Rob came back to speak at one of Bob Dim's summer groups, and it was just like, it moved me. And Rob probably don't even remember. It was the same one where Mike Jarvis spoke. I don't know if you remember, but Rob was so passionate. Like we have a similar path in a sense, and I wanted to be part of South Lakes basketball so bad that, you know, when it was my time as a freshman, I started off on the JV team, and, you know, all of a sudden halfway through the season, I think it was Troy came to me and was like, Dale, I don't think you're playing tonight. Or something happened. I was like, what did I do? And then later on, someone came by and left a jersey, the varsity jersey on my desk, and on my locker. And Coach Byrd was like, "You suiting up varsity tonight," and I couldn't believe it. You know,
You came up because Quinn got hurt.
Man, I think we got hit with a bug or something. Quinn was hurt. Jaja was out. I think you got hurt. So an opportunity presented itself, you know. So after that, I was on the varsity team, and I mean, I didn't have the pressure. I wanted to be there so bad, and every game, I knew my big brothers had my back. So I mean, it was great. You know, we had an incredible run, incredible moments. Even leading up to my senior year, it was weird because I didn't have my big brothers anymore, and we had a pretty good team, but we just couldn't keep our group together. And you know, I wasn't able to get that fourth regional championship, you know. But all the past three meant so much to me. And even when I went to college, nothing was like playing basketball in South Lakes.
I agree with that.
I didn't even win a district, so it's nice to have three regionals, Lonsdale. So, well, look, you know, one thing that's evident is that as much talent as the South Lakes had, it never won a state championship. And when you think about, you know, the level of players, it is surprising. I asked Grant this question, and one thing he brought up, and it was true, is that Hampton was a bad matchup because he described them as football players that played basketball. They were big. Eric Hunter played college. They had Aaron Munday. They had a guy named Lonnie Mann. They were big. And they had Gannon Baker, good size, Kevin Swan, but they had a really good team. They weren't a good matchup for you guys. But generally, and Brian, you probably weren't as close as some of the other guys to get in there, or maybe even John, but you saw the other teams play. What was it that South Lakes couldn't get over the hump? What was South Lakes missing, or was it just the luck of the draw and it's hard to win a state championship? Who wants to go first on that one?
I'll go. Because the three losses for me were so different. I'd never seen anything like Michael Evans, talking 92.
He's a Booker T. Washington guard.
He's a Booker T. Washington. That one just was a blur. Like that dude was so overpowering. I'm not even. If we played that game, you know, 5 more times, I'm not sure that we pull it out. Like it was just different. My junior year, Joe's senior year, we just choked. Those guys played you know, it's no secret we were up and down type of team. That's Coach Byrd's hallmark. And they held the ball for the entire game. And
that was Woodbridge, right?
That was
game was that's a famous game, and that was a game at Robinson.
Yep.
And,
yep.
Yeah.
And you know, certainly you can't. You know, Joe carried us for so long. I just think those of us around him didn't give him the help that we needed. You know, myself included. But they were a great team, great game plan. They executed it perfectly. And we just didn't get it done. And then my senior year, that one, we just went cold. Like we were so hot for like 6 or 7 games. And, you know, me, Mark Wilkins, like we just went ice cold. And, you know, it might be luck of the draw. just, we just didn't have the right, games, or, we didn't have the game on that day to make it happen. But it's hard to do. The only one that I wish we could have back was Woodbridge. There's games you're going to go cold. There's games you're going to run into a buzzsaw. Like there's no guarantee that we get past Woodbridge that we lock up Iverson. I know that would have been my job, and I'd had my fits with him in the summer. So, it's just luck of the draw. I do agree with Grant on the Hampton one. Those dudes were ginormous. But it's not a sore spot for me. Like we handled our business. We just, lost those games, unfortunately.
Yeah, Julian, I'll tell you what, one thing, my take on it is, that Woodbridge game is the perfect epitome of an ugly loss is always better than or an ugly win is always better than a pretty loss. We had plenty of those. I mean, they just held that thing. And I do remember that game. I think once you get down south, though, similar to what Grant says, it's a different level of athlete. And I think a lot of it is because they're dual sport athletes, right? Troy was one of the only ones, I think, on our team that was a dual sport athlete. By the time we got to South Lakes, we were basketball all day, every day. You look at guys like Iverson, who was state of, player of the year in both football and basketball. You look at a guy like Michael Evans, you tell me he couldn't put on a couple pads and go play. I think it was just, once again, my freshman year, we went up against those guys and they just overpowered us. That's what it was. So for me, it would almost be like us playing against some of the teams in DC. There's just a different level of athlete there. And we had a very athletic team, we really did. But then once you got down south, and that's just kind of how it happened, that Tidewater area, I don't know if it was something in the water or those guys just chose, their the time that they played, those old, the pretty boys from Northern Virginia, that might have whet their appetite. I remember, I did have a big game. I think prior to the Booker T. Washington game, I think I had like a 40-point game or something. It had set a 37. It set a record. And then, is that what it was? And then Michael Evans came in, and I remember him specifically. We were at UVA, and that was one of the schools that was on my short list. And I remember Corey Alexander was in the stands, and Michael Booker came down and basically cut up our entire press on his own. Eventually went to the basket and made a point to run by Corey Alexander and yell at him, "If I come to this school, you're done." And that's for me. That's, once we got down south, it was just a different level of athlete. I'm not saying there were better players than us, but once again, because I think you did have dual athletes, you know how it is. You always want one football player on your team. Yeah. Like my enforcer was Quinn's brother, Josh Harwood. Nobody could get anywhere near me without Josh coming over there and trying to rip their head off. So I was safe. Yeah. But Josh, once again, single sport athlete. I think once you get down south, you got multiple athletes, and a lot of them do play football. Just a different grit. You know what I mean? That's my take.
Maybe nowadays though, with there's more AAU. Back then, AAU was limited. Maybe if you played those type of athletes more often, or maybe if like South Lakes was doing more holiday tournaments, in Norfolk or Richmond, maybe it would have been easier to adjust.
Yeah, possibly. You can play that. You can play that game all day long. You know what I mean? You really can. But yeah, also you got Boo Williams down there. When you got a guy who's on the board of Nike, because he touches every single basketball athlete, male or female, that comes through, any East Coast program, there's just a different level of commitment there. But yeah, that was always the monkey on our back. We were great, until we got to states. And then, unfortunately we just always ended a little bit early. And I got a couple, my buddy Jeet, who a lot of these guys know, always like to rub it in our face. Yeah, he played tennis, exactly, with Matt Rosner, who was one of the smaller point guards to come through it. He always likes to rub it in our face that they do have a state championship, even though nobody ever remembers that. So I can't say anything. I was like, you're right.
Joey, I tell Jeet that was a club sport. That wasn't a real sport. So he gets a kick out of that.
It's a hobby.
I hope he goes back and listens to this. Know that Jeet, tennis is a club sport for you, buddy.
That's right. Yeah, record that.
Julian, I'd say two things. Like one, Joey, Josh still wants to take people. Josh still wants to kick butt and take people by the throat and destroy them. So he's still that protector. But I will say, Julian, I will give a little different slant on it as far as I can speak to our year. I think our junior year, we had a ton of talent, and it's well documented. Our chemistry was off. But I thought we had a really good team. We just didn't blend well and mesh well together at all. And so that was a downfall. But I think my senior year, there was an X factor I thought could have made a difference. And I thought what Joey says is accurate. Michael Evans carved us out. Speed and prowess was big on that team. but I think Mike Summey was the type of player who had a different level of speed and athleticism. But the challenge was at that time, Mike was not on the team. So he started off the year, things came up. He was really our point guard on that. I actually got thrown back into playing point guard, being 6'8", not nearly athletic to keep up with those guys. And I always thought, man, maybe if we had that extra speed, because Cam Howard was on that team and he had a lot of speed as well, but we just needed a little bit more of that. And I thought perhaps sometimes if Mike was there playing point and our natural lineup was there, perhaps maybe, we would have maybe pulled that one out. But if the ifs and buts were beer and nuts, we'd have quite a party, right? So the game moves on.
Yeah,
it's true.
If it was a fifth, we'd all be drunk.
Yeah. Well, anyone else want to touch this one? I want to go into.
I'll touch it because you battled. I mean, to talk about a game that I think it was 88 when my man Bill Courtney, when at Lee, they beat us in the regions, and that was the 88 team where Jerome was our leader, and that was like one of our power. That was like our power team, and that's a tough one, to handle. But 89, when we played Hampton, Aaron Monday, that same squad. We played against those guys in 89, and they beat us, that team that Grant was talking about. But I'm gonna throw my guards under the bus a little bit because me and Grant was holding down the front line. It was a load. Those guys was a load, and our guards, we was a little, we was off that night. I think our guards was like 8 for 20 something that night.
Who was that, Mike? That was Mike Ellison and
guards. I ain't saying Come on now,
Rob, who you really calling out, Rob? Call him out, baby. Make a name for yourself. Call him out, baby.
Saying, and it's in terms of that, what they call it, like the Bay Area in Virginia. What do they call it? Like
Tidewater.
Tidewater area.
Tidewater area. Yep.
That's the reason why those guys are hungry. You hear me?
Yeah.
Like they're hungry. They are hungry. Even when they're successful, they're hungry. So they have a different attitude, historically, just think about the history of the guys that come down there. I mean, they're not too far from Jamestown, and that whole history that follows that Tidewater area. That's where that hunger comes from. Yeah, and they feel like Northern Virginia guys are privileged guys. So when we come down, they want to eat our heads off. Yeah. Like, I know that from playing like in all of these different leagues and going down and playing. And even if you're not even on the team and you say I'm from Northern Virginia, they look at you, they're like, you might put a little bit of sugar and cream in the coffee and all that other good stuff. You know what I'm saying? And call us a little soft. That's what they do. And so that's how they come at us. But we battled. We just came up short, man. We ran out of real estate.
No, I was going to say, man, South Lakes, there was no one soft on that team. They just had a different level of hunger, because South Lakes never had a soft. From 81 on, they were never soft.
Yeah.
No, it's just, and I'm just saying, like, they say that.
Yeah, they're next level.
I mean, they say the same thing in DC and Maryland about us Northern Virginia guys. So, like, in 89, we made a point, and everybody gonna see this, and they know I stand on my square. We made a point to destroy everybody in front of us from, DC, Maryland, New York, Tidewater guys everywhere. We made it a point that year that we wasn't gonna have it. Mm-hmm. And so, that year we lost to Hampton in the semis for the states, and Archbishop Malloy to Kenny Anderson. Those were our 2 losses my senior year.
Oh, that's great.
That's legit.
Well, and Jon, let's start with you on this one, because you got Wendell Byrd in his first couple of years. You and Brian both did. Did you guys think that Wendell was going to be so successful? Now, from my point of view, I officiated his games. He was never very nice to me. It was weird. I for some reason, I always felt like he didn't like me for some reason. Kind
of surly, Julian. You come off as kind of surly. So I'm going to defend Coach on this.
He exactly. He never lost when I was officiating, but we never got along so well. I never understood that. I remember one time we did a scrimmage. You do 6 quarters in the scrimmage, and you don't get paid for scrimmages. So I put some money in a Coke machine, and it took my money. And I said, "Hey, Coach walked by. I said, hey, this Coke machine just took my money." He says, "I have nothing to do with Coke machines." I was like, all right, man, all right, coach. But anyway, that being said, I always had so much respect for him as a coach because I love the way he was able to keep this great talent at South Lakes. He was able to, the private schools were nearby. Flint Hill was in the market for great talent. And Wendell just, he kept you guys together. He thought outside the box. He'd have big guys like Joey and Grant could play point guard. He didn't pigeonhole you guys to be in the middle. Joey wasn't a point guard, but he was allowed to shoot outside. I like the way he was able to mold you guys. He had a vision. He would play freshmen on varsity right away. Some of the things that other coaches may not have done. But anyway.
Oh, Joey was liking the dribble. I do remember that.
I wasn't very good at it, but I liked it.
Exactly. But anyway, Jon, let me get you in on this one. Did you know that Wendell was going to be, Coach Byrd was going to be successful? And what are your thoughts about Coach?
Yeah, well, I thought so. I first met him at South Lakes basketball camp in 1980. I was 10 years old, and he was just a young coach, just working for the summer. But I think, BA, you had him your senior year. That was his first year, right? If I recall, 85. Mm-hmm. And but the year before that, he was the JV coach. And you could tell, like, this was that, it was for real. He was, continuing the tradition, and, everybody wanted to play for him. I will say, probably my most distinct memory of Coach Byrd was you talk about all the things he was good at: tactician, getting conditioned, team chemistry. Well, in me, quite frankly, he saw a player he wasn't sure was ready to run a South Lakes team. Like I said, we were somewhat of a down year, and he was trying to really make me own the team as the point guard. So my most distinct memory was in a game, I threw a pass. It was early in the season. I threw a pass to Jerome. It went through his hands, went out of bounds. And in my opinion, it was Jerome's turnover. Okay. He takes me aside and says, "That's like, you can't let that happen again." I'm like, "Coach, what, really what he was saying was, you're responsible for everything as a point guard." And, I kind of didn't get it at the time, but, now I really do. And that's like kind of the bigger thinker that he was, even at a relatively young age. Because, we had him in front of me. He was in his early 30s, right? He was a young man.
Yeah. He's still.
I think he might have even been like 28 or 29 when he was my senior year.
How about you, Brian? Brian, you got him his first varsity season.
I just think he and I both were kind of, it was more of a collaboration than a player coach thing, because, it was his first, and he had some big shoes to fill after Jim. And for me, I was his first, let's call it, scholarship athlete. So, and it almost wasn't even fair, because, the way my recruiting went was probably way different. I might even talk to him about this than most of the players other than Troy, because, our father was not getting involved in our recruiting. So, Coach Byrd was really befuddled about the hands-off approach. And he would say, what does your father say? And I would say, he says nothing. It's on me. His big thing was, I played college football and baseball. I had my careers, and so this is on you. And, I don't want you coming back saying I made you go anywhere. I think probably the best thing, not on the court, but it was like the whole recruiting thing. He hadn't been through it yet. So I wasn't the best example for him on the recruiting trail, because, like the military academies, I wasn't going to military academy. Coach, don't even waste their time. Don't bring because I was in National Honor Society, the Ivies were coming. Coach, I'm not going to Ivies. So it was, and I'm sure it was the same way with Troy. So the recruiting thing was different, but on the court, I just think he and I, it was a collaboration, because we both knew that I had big shoes to fill from the guys who preceded me, and he had big shoes to fill from Coach Lewis, and winning was the tradition. So we were in it together. And like I said, I just don't, Mark Seneca getting a deep thigh bruise our senior year really affected our our success, because it allowed people to concentrate on me more. And if Mark was out there more, there's no way they could concentrate on me. So, that I feel bad for Coach Byrd, because he didn't, that injury with Mark, and he didn't start really coming back until we played you guys, and he saw the result. I don't mean to keep bringing it up, Julian, but I do.
4 times. Yeah.
But yeah, I just was, I knew I was going to be Coach Well, and he was a great coach, and I knew he was going to do well. And he definitely had a wealth of talent, but you talk about on another level, Phil Jackson had a lot of personalities that he had to coach, and so did Coach Byrd. Lots of personalities, and the tradition speaks for itself.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think for Coach, his consistency, I think was one of his, was the foundation of his success. Like, once again, he treated Grant the same that and maybe that's a little bit, of a false statement, but for the most part, whether you were 1 or 12, he was holding you accountable. I remember my freshman year, I was missing a couple layups because I was getting scared going to the basket. He put me on the other end for 30 minutes. Said, just go shoot layups. And BA, I was going to say the same thing. One thing that we're not talking about is the personalities that came through that program, man. Yeah. Coach's ability to manage personalities. And I didn't realize it till later on. I mean, especially, obviously, I had a couple years, we had some big personalities on that team. But for him to be able to actually navigate through that, and almost sometimes use that to his advantage. That for me is one of his best traits. Personalities are such a big piece of it. And, because South Lakes was on such a big stage and everybody wanted to be that guy, he'd have 12 guys with 12 different personalities that he had to navigate each and every year. Some guys who wanted to take more shots, some guys who wanted to play more minutes. To the point where, he would literally go face to face with somebody when they weren't doing their job. He would hold you accountable. And for guys who were right on the edge there, and unfortunately, like Mike Summy was one of those guys who just unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it towards the end from an academic standpoint. And I don't mean to be, saying names like that, but there were multiple examples of that. Coach would really do all he could to keep those guys on the straight and narrow. And that's one thing I remember. I mean, obviously my background's a little bit different than some others. But Coach, I think one thing he always did, he cared. He cared and he would hold you accountable and wouldn't let you get away with anything, regardless of how successful you were,
Yeah, Julian, I'll say one thing that kind of shaped me is what I think about one of the most powerful conversations that I had with Coach Byrd was after I got out of high school. And I'm sitting there, it was after my freshman year of college. I'm sitting in the stands, we're watching a summer league game. And we just had this open conversation, which was really unique because it wasn't like we actually rapped like this a lot during the time in school, right? But it was just really just personal conversation. And I was kind of getting something off. I didn't understand, a little bit to Joey's point, actually why he allowed certain players, and we'll do the Rob Robinson, we won't mention who those players were, but, during my, junior year, that there were certain things that were happening. I'm like, well, how come they still exist? How come they're still on the team? Like when you look at these events that happen, how are they still there? And that would bother me. And he gave me a really good perspective because he had a higher level thinking as a coach and as a person. He's like, hey, Quinn, like we made the decision that these players, these people, this is their best chance. This is the chance that we need to show them a little bit more grace to help them get through the system so they can go on and be like who they're created and called to be. And I was like, wow, like it really shaped me to say, yeah, it's not always black and white in terms of the way you think of full accountability. He had that care for people and a bigger level perspective to help people grow. And that really touched me and really shifted the way I thought at a young age. It wasn't all about me, which I needed to hear that message.
That's true. I mean, I know Byrd worked with me a lot, man. I was a load. And he,
Would you say you had a big personality, Rob?
I would say that my personality would fill the room pretty quick, and he did a great job of managing people. You know what I mean? Like some of us had to be managed like young men, like literally he had to talk to us like men because in some of our households, that's how we're spoken to, even though we're a kid or a high school kid, you're still, all of us had different responsibilities at home. And Coach Byrd had to basically learn the person, learn the environment, and put it all together. And he did a great job of like individually how he had to deal with each person. You know what I'm saying? Coach Byrd is like, you know, he will always be a great mentor in my life. My program right now that I run is the same blueprint that Coach Byrd gave me back in 1987. That's just, I mean, like he knows my personality, he knows what I'm good at, he knows what I'm bad at, and he pushes the stuff that I'm bad at to balance me out. And that's what I say, like, you know, he's just a great leader of men.
And an educator at heart, you know, I mean, he always has been, you know, I mean, he's an educator at heart, whether that's from a scholastic perspective or from a, you know, coming of age perspective, or how to navigate, you know, the recruiting process. Like at the end of the day, you peel it all back, he's an educator, you know?
Yes. The great teacher.
Yep.
He was definitely ahead of his time. He was, you know, there's so many black coaches now, but at the time, if you think about it, Coach Lewis as well, there wasn't that many African-American coaches at these big programs at the time. And again, it doesn't seem like a big deal now, but it was back then. And the way he handled himself, you know, he had gone to George Mason. I guess him and his brother were only two of the only black kids in that school when he went there. So his whole life, he'd kind of been, you know, kind of bucking the odds and overcoming the odds. But let's talk a little bit about rivals in the area that you guys respect. I mean, we talked about Michael Evans, and Michael Evans was a great player. But were there other players out here that you guys had a lot of respect for that you want to give a shout out to, or say something kind about while we're on the air?
Brian Hill.
So you want me to go first because I'm the oldest? Is that what you're saying?
Go ahead, OG.
Yeah, well, the guys that come, we all had Herndon as our rivals. Mm-hmm. So, you know, Keith Moody and Barry Johnson and Tellish, Edward Bourne, those were the guys that, you know, we kind of, they were essentially Reston Herndon is the same town almost. Mm-hmm. So that was the big rivalry, and the guys that we always got hyped up. And Keith and I have become really good friends since. He went on to play basketball at Nebraska, and we've hung out since. And, you know, like that was the thing, Herndon and South Lakes. I think it changed a little bit around like Troy and Joy's years, but Herndon was it back then.
Yeah, it actually, to me, Herndon wasn't so much our rival as Chantilly was. In you know, youth basketball, you had the summer league where we were playing around Herndon guys. Even though I was old for my grade, so I played travel with Joey, but most of my classmates played, I forget the guy's name, but they played with mostly Herndon guys. So Herndon, to me, those guys were friends. So like, I didn't look at them as rivals. And even though Garden Randy Dodson was the pain in the ass, I never like, they weren't the thing for me. And I love playing in Herndon was my favorite gym, but they weren't the rival for me. It was Chantilly. We hated Chantilly. And it wasn't, it started my sophomore year. I love they had a shooter that I had to guard named Shane. Clancy. And like, I loved his game. Like, I respected the hell out of that dude. But it started sophomore year with me, and I still hate Chantilly with a passion. But it was never Herndon. And you know, in Northern Virginia, you know, to me, the best player I ever played against was Kobe Turner at Lee.
Chopped him up too.
No, I mean, I hold him below his average.
You chopped him up. Chopped him up.
But that was a game we weren't supposed to win.
Troy.
What's that?
I said that was a battle, man. What you mean?
That was a battle. No. I mean, he still got his 25 or something. I didn't lock him up all the way, but he had to deal with me too. But I just think like my favorite game in high school was that league game, because I had never played somebody my size that could shoot like that, handle like that. You know, we just had a perfect game plan that day, and Dale was off the hook, and so was Mark Wilkins, and But you know, Kobe was certainly the best that I played in Northern Virginia.
And Troy, you didn't mention Daryl Franklin. I think he's one of the only players in the history of Northern Virginia to win the DC Metropolitan Player of the Year. I mean,
Daryl was nice.
Yeah, he was a tremendous high school player, great college player too. Lonsdale, you want to get into this?
College did he go to?
What's that?
College
He went to American.
He went to American?
Yeah.
Did Fudd and Daryl Franklin go to American? Did they both go to American?
They did. I think they were a year apart though, weren't they? Maybe a year or two apart. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And Dale, I'm not going to cut you, not to cut you off, but I'm going to cut you off real quick, and then I'm going to pass it on to you because I think Troy, I agree. I think Herndon was, obviously Latiki Colombo was always, everybody would get excited to play him. Randy Dotson was, obviously really, really good player. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that the Daryl Franklins and the Tim Fudd was probably the guy that I looked forward to playing against the least because he was that wiry, skinny, rec spec wearing dude that just did all the dirty work. And, once again, it was like the pretty boys from Nova coming up to the country boys in Chantilly, you know what I mean? And that's how it was, I remember like our fans are starting to yell like, moo cows and cow tipping, even though they're like 2 miles away, it wasn't like really. So for me, I think Troy nailed it. I think Chantilly for us was a big rival. For me, Greg Williams was, a really, really impressive high school basketball player. I mean, the dude looked like he was 25 years old or something year, you know what I mean? And
who else stayed on that team was Duran. Duran was built like a grown man.
Yeah, Duran was stacked too. Yep. Yeah. But yeah, for me, Tim Fudd and Daryl Franklin, I mean, super, super underrated in the Northern Virginia, kind of ecosystem. Obviously, Daryl Franklin got his due. But I played a lot of AAU in DC, against those, the Dwayne Simpkins, the Vaughn Jones, the Dickie Simpkins, all those guys. And Daryl just never he could compete against any of those guys. The fact that he didn't get bigger opportunities was a little surprising, although obviously American's a great school. But yeah, that Chantilly team, but Greg Williams was just a men among boys. Sorry, Dale, it's your turn.
No, I agree with Troy. For some reason, I guess after Daryl left, I don't know what happened over at Chantilly, but they hated us. I remember in summer league at American, they were out for blood, setting going with me in my mouth. And you could see it that they did not like us. I don't know what we did to them, but for years it just kept on that trend. Like, we would play Herndon, and to be honest with you, like Herndon basically, those are our brothers. Even though we have this huge rivalry, but we're all friends. But Chantilly, like they wanted to hurt us, and they didn't have the biggest team, may not have the most talented team, but they came to play every single time. And I would be bruised up after every Chantilly game.
Julian, while he's coming back in, real quick on the Herndon thing, Gary was part of our program.
Oh, that's right, he was.
And I always felt like those games, like he knew us so well. And while I think we usually had more talented teams, they gave us the business every single time. And we all were friends, but to me, I feel like we should acknowledge Gary's greatness too, having come out of the program as one of our coaches. But he was one of the best coaches around, and he always had those boys ready to play.
Hey, Julian, I'll share with you. I got to run here, and as you can tell, man, this is a league game. I'm just legit play some basketball. 9:30 Central Time Zone here, right?
Greene.
Look, I can recall, as well as what other fellows are saying, is another team I thought that gave us a challenge was the I don't know if they mentioned James Madison. They had these Lamberson kids. One went to Stanford, and I don't know. I think Bart ended up going. Bart
went to Stanford, and Grant went to I don't know where Grant went.
I think he went to William and Mary.
Okay.
They had some good, and they also had some good little pieces around them. So they played disciplined, controlled basketball, and so they were a challenge sometimes. As far as playing against them. I thought that was another good competition. But other than that, man, I agree with the fellas, man. Chantilly is the people you always want a dog. Herndon was like the boys and the bros, and you're happy to rub it in your face when you won. I love Luchiki Colombo's game. He was like that 6'7", could shoot, could play in and out, but he wasn't uber athletic. Like I had no hope of being like a Grant Hill, so he brought me some hope that I could still go do something on the court. So it was good.
Yeah. Lutiki's he's tough to be Facebook friends with because he's always posting this great food. every time you go to these restaurants, well, it's like this dish just makes you hungry, you know? Well, guys, one thing, so I went to Robinson, and then when I went to UVA, it was an adjustment for me because there was racial tension. It was very much a Southern city back then. And, you know, Robinson wasn't diverse like South Lakes, but there wasn't a lot of tension in school. You know, I was curious for you guys going to South Lakes and being around such diversity in terms of income levels and also racial. Was it an adjustment for you guys when you left Reston and went to other places where things weren't as tolerant? And you're like, whoa, this is the way the rest of the world operates. Did you guys?
I'll go first.
Sure.
You want to go first, Roy? Or
Go ahead, man.
yeah. So moving to Reston was a godsend because before that it was just me, and then I moved to Reston, diversity, 2 Black coaches. So going back the other direction was not an adjustment. So actually, my story is probably different than theirs.
For me, it was an adjustment in that. So I chose baseball, which is a predominantly white sport, and I went to GW where I was the only Black person on the team. But that school is very international, and it's also very Connecticut, New York money. And while our old man made some loot, he didn't act like it. And so it was really tough. It was a tough adjustment for me at GW. I got in a fight in the first weekend because one of my teammates was running his mouth about my mother being light skinned. And I wrecked his world, and you know, I almost lost my scholarship, and even, you know, playing in college, playing in Atlanta or playing for Atlanta, I was in these southern towns that were just ridiculously racist. So I had a tough time after I left South Lakes because of the school I chose and the sport I chose. You know, and that's probably the reason why, like, whether it's what I did in baseball or basketball, like all my memories of sports are South Lakes basketball for me. All my positive memories. Nothing I've ever experienced, not even coaching. Nothing has I haven't experienced anything like I did in those 4 years at South Lakes.
Yeah, Julian, I'll chime in before I roll here because
Yeah.
it's an important topic, really.
Sure.
And I could say it was an eye-opener to me when I went to college. I went to school at Davidson College, right outside of Charlotte. And I'd say within the group of the team, you know, it was non-issue. But it was when I went outside the community that I really got hit with racism. And I saw what people would say, and I was just floored by it. Like, it's stuff it wouldn't even bring up on this huddle. And I'm like, wow, I didn't really know that it was that prevalent. And then, you know, having a roommate that I moved off campus with for 2 years, my sophomore and junior and senior, that was Black, it just was eye-opening. You know, it was eye-opening what the lack of understanding, empathy, connection, the whole place was just so fragmented. I'm like, wow, it became real. And it really opened me up to a whole level of empathy, you know, on what other people are going through out there. And so the social injustice, the racial injustice, it just strikes a chord with me because I just feel like it dries up so many emotions because people on this call are like, to me, we're friends and people I love to be around and play with. And so when I see it out there, even our culture today, it just hits a chord, you know, hits a chord where it's so wrong and it's got to be, you know, it's got to continue to be changed one person at a time. So that's my little dab on it, but it was eye-opening, I would say. And to Troy's point, when he went to those southern communities, it was real. And this was, you know, only 30 years ago, right? It wasn't even too long ago.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Julian, I'll tell you, I think for me, there wasn't like diversity was all right, quick. Q, I'm gonna talk to you, man. I'm gonna call you. Good seeing you, dude. Yes, sir.
Good luck, man. Drop 30. Drop a 30 piece, Quinn.
47. I'm dropping a 47 bomb tonight, Dr. Lev. I'm dropping it.
Hey, get that
Go for South Lakes. Represent South Lakes.
I would say that for me, like, I knew nothing different. You know, like I went to Terracet. You know, I started going to Terracet when I was in kindergarten. So for me, you know, and then obviously got involved in basketball, you know, from the time I was 11, 12 years old. So as I started to kind of understand the world around me, I knew nothing other than half my friends were Black, half my friends were white. Had a couple Indian friends, had a couple Asian friends. So the beauty of Reston was it enabled you to grow up in an environment like that. So that was the norm. right? That was the status quo. I remember, I went when I was 13 years old, my rising ninth grade year. I remember, I think it was, we were playing an AU game at Gonzaga. So actually, it was rising eighth grade years. First time I got a dunk in a game. We lost, and then there's a team called the Kingman Pythons, which was down on 14th and Florida Avenue before the whole transition. This was 14th back when DC was still DC. And I got invited to come try out for the team. My father was in a branch, in a three-letter branch of the government that, was very familiar with the DC area. So he took me in there and basically had a gun, on him in the car, in the trunk. And we were literally probably the only two white people within probably a 10-block radius. And I walked into a gym that had an armed guard. It was a YMCA number 10 boys club, had armed guard and bulletproof glass. And I walked into the gym and it literally was like a movie, like the balls just stopped. And the officer came kind of running over to us and they're like, you guys lost? You guys good? And I'm like, no, I'm here to try out for the team. And then the coach saw me and he came running over. And this was a gym that literally had 2 baskets, probably 50 kids in there. They were using pull-up bars for baskets. These kids were just, these were inner city kids, at the core. And here comes this, Northern Virginia, white boy, walking in the gym. And I was good. Like, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't, my dad was a little bit nervous, but I was good. This is what I was used to. And we started warming up. And as soon as I got a dunk, that was it, man. That was it. And for the next, 5 years, I played with that same team. And unfortunately, out of the probably 13, 14 people who started with me when I was 13, 14 years old, probably only 3 of us made it out. And the other 10 got shot and killed, locked up, lost to the game. And for me, now that was a different story than Reston. I would bring some of these guys out to Reston, after the, practice on a Saturday or something. And these kids' eyes were just, it was a different world to them. A lot of these kids had never been out of DC. So for me, Reston was really the foundation that gave me the confidence to go into an environment like that and be like, what's everyone looking at? You know what I mean? And maybe I was naive, but I really do just feel like that's what Reston gave me. And it's funny because you think of Reston and the last thing you would think about right now is diversity. Reston is arguably the Silicon Valley of the East Coast, right? Like high, affluent, area to be in. You don't think diversity, but yet, before the town center was ever there, at the core of Reston, the success was the diversity. So I never, anywhere I went, I ended up obviously going to Duke and then went to BU, and Boston's a pretty racial town. And, I went from a predominantly basketball school to a predominantly hockey school, and saw some things that, like Troy and Quinn both said, just, really nasty, unfortunate situations that fortunately I was able to deal with and just kind of look past it and still maintain who I was because, kind of Reston was in my DNA. So, I think really, from a foundational standpoint, Reston was absolutely I couldn't imagine a better place to grow up. I really couldn't.
I always got that sense. Some of you guys, I had to mute some because there was some back noise for all of us. I want to also talk about what was your post South Lakes career look like? Joey talked a little bit about his 12 years overseas. I know, Troy played baseball, Lonsdale played college. What was your college and pro careers like, and what did being a South Lakes Seahawk, how did that influence your career? Who wants to go first, Rob?
Muted.
Going to Penn State,
Oh.
I just wanted to play. I had some other bigger schools after me. Number one, I didn't want to go to school in Virginia. I loved my high school friends, but I wanted a new experience. And Penn State was my first official visit, and I signed before I left. And no regrets, because those guys that I played with are still my best friends, and we converse 3-4 times a week to this day. But it did become a job. And by the time I started freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, I was in a shooting slump, and looking back on it, I didn't acknowledge that a lot of it had to do, I had really bad tendonitis. So every time I was jumping, it was like somebody was stabbing me with a knife. So mentally, it just totally affected my jump shot, which you seem to remember it more than me, because I always consider myself like a defensive guy. And so I just transformed my game into a defensive stopper, channeling Danny Scott. My last 2 years, I went from being one of the scorers to the defender, because I knew I'd always get time if I was doing that. And by the time I was, done, I was done. I didn't want to play anymore. Probably could have played overseas. Probably should have, just to have the experience of traveling around the world. But I've made up for that since then. And I also tried out for some pro baseball teams, because I thought when I got to Penn State, I'd be able to play both. But because of the tendonitis, coach wasn't having it. So I had to wait till my eligibility was up. I actually made the team in the fall after my senior year, because you get one more year. But he said, the coach wasn't going to play me. So I was like, well, and actually Grant's dad got me a trial with the Orioles. And obviously I didn't make it, but I didn't want to look back and say I should have tried. Pops was real instrumental in that. He's like, you'll work for 40 years, go try it. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So then I went back to grad school, still reaping the benefits of having gone to Penn State. But I definitely created a monster of being the unofficial mayor of that town. And I had to get out because it was sucking my soul. So I'm content in the mortgage business. I do a lot of cycling. I like doing triathlons. But basketball was done in 1989 when I graduated.
Who wants to go next? Jon, you've been quiet for a little bit, or Rob, you want to get in here?
Yeah, I can. I mean, let me see. I graduated in 89 from South Lakes, and I went to Sheridan Junior College in Wyoming. When you can talk about diversity, like coming from Reston in our area, the playing community, like, we had like some racial tension, but nothing like, catastrophic. But when I went to Wyoming, I went to Sheridan, Wyoming. When I tell you it was 4 of us, 4 Black guys on the team and 1 Bosnian guy. And that was it. That was it. But they didn't treat us any different. And that was the great thing. Like, we were just treated like normal humans. And, it was great. Going out to Wyoming, it was a culture shock at first, because it was like, right at the foot of the mountain. And, coming from Reston and going to DC, we go to North Carolina sometimes, but not like that. It was a culture shock, but it was also a great time for me to turn from, a high school boy into a man. And so I had an opportunity to just work and, going to Sheridan, becoming a junior college All-American, and leaving Sheridan and going from Sheridan to Niagara. The reason why I got to Niagara from Sheridan was George Washington University was recruiting Jerome Scott, and also, of course, looking at Grant. In the meantime, me doing the little things, they became interested in me as well. And the coach, he ended up leaving George Washington and going to Niagara. And then he, tracked me down at Sheridan and offered me a full scholarship. And so that's how I went from Sheridan to Niagara. And then going to Niagara, just, going into Western New York, upstate New York, Niagara Falls. It was great. It's a great place to be. The scenery was great. A great, Catholic university. Up there, we had to go to mass. I learned a lot. Just learned a lot about different cultures, different like religions, and people, and just being home my craft there in Niagara, working hard. We made the NIT. We went to the NIT. We was 23-7 my senior year, and after that, we went to Europe. We did a European trip in between my junior and senior year. Actually, I got a quick story with that. When I was a junior at Niagara, going into my senior year, in between, I used to go down to Duke to visit Grant. So I would always go down there and work out and play alongside those guys down there at Duke. And I ended up hurting my knee. I tore my knee at Card Gym. Joey, you remember Card Gym down there at Duke, guarding Chris Collins. I was going for a steal. He didn't shake me. So And so,
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
so I went, went back, and then we went to Europe. I had my rehab and everything. We went to Europe, and then when we went to Europe, we played in England, and I played extremely well against this England club. And after that, they wanted me to come after my senior year going to Europe, and then that's what started me going to Europe. I mean, literally after our basketball season over, they paid for me to leave college to go and play on their team. And I had 1 semester left, really like 1 semester left. And so I left there, went to Europe, came back, finished up my degree because they honored my scholarship, then went to Venezuela, and then everywhere. I went to Venezuela, then I went to Ireland, then I went to Norway, then I went to Estonia, and then I went to Greece, and then I went to Macedonia.
Wow.
Montenegro. It was all quick. Like, I mean, I didn't come back home once. I think I stayed away from the United States for almost 1.5 years. And they say, you got to go back to the America, like USA basketball, because I check in everywhere. They say, you got to go back to America, And so I came back home and worked out, then Grant was going to Detroit. And so I just was working out with all the pro guys and then going to Europe. So that was my whole pro career was battling against NBA guys and then leaving, going to Europe, destroying those guys over there. So like my career, my pro career was roughly, I would say probably about 7.5 years or something like that. About 7.5 years, 10 seasons, happy. I've seen the whole world, man. Seen the whole world. I learned about different cultures. I learned, I like to tell everybody, I learned the truth. So yeah, it was just a great journey for me. And it started here at South Lakes. And so now what I'm doing now is I teach, I teach here at Fairfax County Public Schools, and I have my basketball program. I'm gonna have probably 7 teams this year. Just fundamentals, man. Rob Robinson Fundamental Basketball Academy. We everywhere,
Sponsored by South Lakes.
I'm helping South Lakes. I'm staying within the community, Joy.
Built on the foundation of South Lakes fundamentals.
That's it, right there. That's all we do. That's what I'm doing. Just back here in Reston. I'm back in Reston, so it's a blessing, and just happy to be able to build communities in these young people. The same way that Coach Byrd, Irv, Mr. Kitchen, Bob Dem, Mr. Lindquist, every coach, Coach Zach, every coach that stepped in front of me and helped me, I'm doing everything that they taught me back in my community.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Rob. What a great career you had. I would love to see the world and play some basketball overseas for 7 years. So,
right.
Yeah. But Jon, let's see if your microphone's working.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I actually was not recruited for basketball, but I was a soccer player too. So that's a somewhat rare combo, I think, at South Lakes, basketball and soccer. And I went on to Northwestern, where I played on the soccer team there for 1 year.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah. And now I live north of New York City, and I run our youth program here naturally, because just like everyone else, can't stay away from the game.
Yeah. Awesome, Jon. Well, again, thanks again for all the help with the Facebook group and stuff. It's been great.
Oh, my pleasure. No, what you've done is amazing, and it's a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing what's on there every day.
Oh, well, thanks again. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I can jump in real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, I think, most people know, I went to Duke, it didn't work out, finished up at BU. And, for me, like it was, I don't look back. I played that game long enough, and, people, why you got to Duke, even if you didn't play, why would you leave, and once again, I so many people, what happened, because, I didn't leave on good terms. And, I just kind of kept that to myself because, for 10 years after I left Duke, people were still calling, hey, what happened? At the end of the day, I walked into a situation and I didn't approach it correctly. And, both sides, probably had something to do with it, left and moved on. Coach K and I have since kissed and made up, so we are good at that. And I ended up going to BU because I actually wanted to transfer to UVA at the time. And if it was today, that wouldn't be an issue. And I wouldn't have even had to sit out. But back then you couldn't transfer interconference. You would have had to sit out 2 years and you would have lost a year of eligibility. And so the head assistant at UVA, a guy named Dennis Wolf, had just got the BU job. And so I needed to go somewhere where I had a pretty solid relationship with the coach. UVA had been recruiting me since I was in 7th grade. And so I ended up going to BU. I needed to get out of the spotlight a little bit. Basketball had become tainted for me. It wasn't fun. It became a job really quickly. And a lot of that was because I felt like, the precedent Grant had set. I felt like I kind of failed Reston a little bit. I had all this support in the world, and I'm coming back home like, man, I let you guys down. And that was a personal thing that I struggled with for a while. So I went to BU thinking like, you know what? And I still could have gone to Kentucky. I could have gone to UCLA, Michigan, all the big schools, but I needed to go somewhere where I knew the coach and I could kind of rediscover basketball again. I literally almost tapped out, and I was about to go to Virginia Tech and just go hang out and just forget basketball. It was that bad of an experience. And went to BU thinking I'd fly under the radar, but it kind of backfired because now all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's this guy from Duke. He's going to come and save the program. And I was like, damn it, it wasn't supposed to be that way. So I got to BU and I feel like when I talk to people about BU, I feel like my social game really evolved, but my basketball game started to decline a little bit. And that was just me being 20 years old and arrogant and impatient and having, these expectations of glory built in. And then really I just had to grow up a little bit. So I got to BU and kind of, did my thing there for a semester or two, and then got serious again. And we had a good run. We had a couple, Raja Bell was on that team, who obviously went on to be, the Kobe stopper, so they say, and a good NBA career. We made the tournament a couple of years. And then the year I came out was the year of the lockout. So I graduated in 97, got to go to a year of grad school, and then I came out in 98, which was the year of the lockout. So had a couple tryouts, teed up for some NBA teams, and it was either wait around and try and make a roster that at that point I didn't think I was an NBA player, or go to Europe and try and start making a little bit of money. So I was in Pro B my first year in France, and about 2 weeks into it, I got in a really, really bad car accident. And once again, I'm like, this is it. This is, I was in a small town called Roanne, right outside of Lyon. Got in a bad car accident. I said, you know what, this isn't for me. Nobody spoke English in the town, and I spoke, one word of French. And so talked to my parents a little bit, and they said, look, stick it out till Christmas, reevaluate, which I did. And then I kind of found my legs. And fortunately, my grandparents are from Italy, so I got my Italian citizenship, which obviously Rob and anybody else familiar with European basketball understands. You're only allowed typically 2 Americans on each team. So I got to play as an Italian, which made me significantly more marketable. So after my second year, I moved from France to First Division Germany, had a good year there. And then I got my citizenship, and then I got picked up by a team called Benetton Treviso, which at the time was one of the larger European teams. I only played for Benetton for about 2 years, but I was under contract with them for 8. And Benetton kind of had 20 horses in the stall, and it was just kind of what they needed at the time. So literally, I played 8 years in Italy, a year in Spain, a year in France, Germany, and Belgium. Speak Italian fairly fluently still, have my citizenship. Actually, would have been a silver medalist in the Olympics the year that Italy won. They could only keep one naturalized player on the team, and it was between myself, Dante Calabria, who was a Carolina guy, and then a guy named Radulovic, who was a Bosnian kid. They ended up needing a swingman, so they went with Radulovic, and then I just continued to play in Europe and had a blast, man. I mean, once again, you saw that, like Rob said, man, there's nothing like the education of life, right? And I got to go pick mushrooms in the French Alps. I got to go, be on MotoGP, race courses with Valentino Rossi, like these celebrities that, and the last 3 years I was on a team owned by Giorgio Armani in Milan. And so I was, towards the end of my career, I really became that locker room guy. I could speak Italian fairly fluently. So I was that bridge between the 2 Americans that were trying to get to the NBA and the Italian coach who was trying to win a championship that didn't really care about their initiative, and the Americans didn't really care about his initiative. So I became a politician for the majority of, the last 3 years that I played. Got the opportunity to kind of transition into the management side of that team, but it was time for me to come back home and plant roots in Atlanta. At the time, I thought about getting into coaching, but I knew, and probably could have got on some decent benches. But I knew that I was going to have to chase those opportunities. And every 2-3 years, I was going to have to move. And I had done that. And so just randomly got involved with, I went to Emory. I coached there for 2 years. They were going to pay for my grad school. So I said, yeah, why not? And then I randomly got a job with HBO and cable, did that for about 7 years. Jumped out of cable and got into an entrepreneurial opportunity with a restaurant group and opened up about 7 or 8 units. Started a spice company that we launched in Whole Foods. And then COVID hit, and my business partner and I couldn't get on the same page with where to take the business. So I recently got back into cybersecurity sales, and it's been a good ride. And once again, I still have that itch. I was coaching a girls varsity team for about 3 years, and this new job just takes up too much of my time, so I couldn't do that anymore. But I still coach my youngest son. My oldest one doesn't want to hear me. He don't want to hear dad coaching him. He knows everything. So yeah, I've had a good run, and once again, I'm at the point in my life where everyone's just, when they, my name still for whatever rings a bell, right? Joey Byrd, you went to Duke, right? Yeah, I did, but you know what? I also went to BU. I also, started a restaurant group. I also, have become successful in multiple, careers. So unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I think my name is still kind of, is kind of tied with Duke, and a lot of that had to do with Grant, right? And one thing about that Grant never did was he never pressured me to do one thing or the other. You know what I mean? It was just I think in my mind, I felt like, well, he went, I should go too. You know what I mean? Plus I was a 6'10" white dude, and most of the time they do pretty well at Duke. So, it all worked out in the end. I met my wife at Boston University. We're still married today. We got 2 awesome kids. We live in Atlanta, Georgia. And every time I go back to Reston, I try and get back to the town center, because, typically once you do, you can kind of figure out what's been going on for the last couple of years by just bumping into 1 or 2 people. So miss it dearly. Don't miss the traffic whatsoever. Although Atlanta traffic isn't much better. So it's, it's been an awesome ride. And ironically, man, I so much of these memories, I don't remember a lot about, I don't have the details of a lot of college games or European games. I remember more about high school than I do any of the other levels that I've played at. And once again, I think it has to do because at that time it was still so pure, it becomes a job, right? When you get paid for it, it becomes a job. And eventually doing it for 12 years, I couldn't wait to be done with it. Now I look back and I'm like, man, I wish I was doing that again. But, grass is always greener. So had a good run.
Yeah, had a great run. Hey, Joey, I'm in sales to law firms. A lot of that is cybersecurity. So we should network and connect.
We should absolutely link up, man.
Yeah. I do have a question for you. Did your game evolve when you played in Europe for so long? Because the Europeans play the game differently. The big guys are different, even though you were always a high post. But was your game different when you were finishing?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny, man, because when I was knocking down jump shots, in high school and putting the ball on the floor quite a bit, and I got to Duke, and in Coach K's credit, he put me down with the guard sometimes. I got to BU though, and it just my mentality shifted a little bit. I felt like all of a sudden I felt more pressure at BU just because here's this big Duke guy coming to save the program. So I just went back to my comfort spot. I just got closer to the rim. And then once I got to Europe, I mean, I made a career out of just, beating people down the floor. I was 6'10", but I was 230, 240. Rob probably knows some of those Eastern European dudes are 6'8", 260. I mean, these are big, strong guys. And fortunately, I would just find my ways on teams to and my skill was was always just to there wasn't much power. It was all finesse, and that's really kind of what I got known for. I mean, I really all I try and do is outwork people. I was a good bench guy. I could speak the language. Arguably, my career was extended because a lot of stuff that I did off the court. So yeah, I mean, my game really, once again, I didn't, I got kind of pigeonholed as the big guy that would just, I'd just try and outrun them, and once again, I was never a 20, a couple early years, I had a couple 20-point seasons, but once I was on those larger teams, once I was on those EuroLeague teams, I really became a reserve guy and backup power forward, backup center. Made it work. I kept fooling them. They kept giving me a contract, so I kept fooling them, kept signing it.
That's awesome.
Use my team, baby.
Yeah,
that's it.
Well,
that's
thanks,
it.
Joe. So,
Keep collecting them checks.
So Troy, what about you? I know you said you were into some coaching and what did being in South Lakes? How did it influence your career and your life?
So after South Lakes, I went to GW for 3 years. Freshman year, I had a great year. Was freshman of the year, led the conference in home runs. I didn't travel those first 3 weekends my freshman year, and that was a new experience for me. Obviously, I was a 4-year guy on baseball and basketball, so not making the cut was whether I agreed with it or not, it certainly was a slap in the face. And my freshman year, once they gave me an opportunity, I made sure they couldn't take it away from me. Then my sophomore year, and I think my coach, my freshman and sophomore year, is one of the worst individuals on the planet. And I don't particularly care if anybody knows who it is, but his name's Jay Murphy. And so I almost quit after my sophomore year because I was done with it. He just made the experience so miserable. But I was playing in upstate New York, and we got a new coach my junior year, and everything changed for me. And it was, his coaching style fit me, and I was 3rd in the country in home runs that year. Got drafted. The way the baseball game works, the most money you're going to get when you get drafted is your junior year. And so, I felt like I didn't have a choice but to leave if I wanted to play pro ball. So I did that. And going into my second year, I screwed up my shoulder in the offseason lifting and did, 16 weeks of rehab. I had a great year hitting, but I couldn't throw anymore. I could throw 90 feet, barely. And so, the rehab never worked. And I was facing surgery at 23 years old that would have taken me out 1.5 years. And, everybody talks about how it becomes a job after you get out of college. Between the fun being out of the game and traveling through terrible towns, making $750, a month, eating it at Waffle Shop 3 meals a day, just because that's what you can afford on $20 per diem. I called it a day and never once regretted that decision to walk away from it. I stayed away from the game for 5 years and then started coaching. And, eventually I discovered I had a passion for it and that I was good at it. And, at this point, I've probably helped 200 kids get into college, in baseball or softball. I still, continue to train. I've got a kid who's probably going to be a 1st-round draft pick as a pitcher this year. I enjoy what I do now more than I ever did playing baseball. But as I said previously, nothing comes close to that experience, playing for Coach Byrd. And so, I'm an accountant right now. And, I train on the side and I certainly, I have an appreciation for basketball that hasn't waned in all these years. But from the baseball standpoint, I enjoy coaching more than I ever did playing. And my coaching style is a combination of Wendell and my Little League baseball coach. But the one thing I think that makes me successful is the way that I've created my gym, is that the older guys always have to mentor the younger guys, which that is a South Lakes thing through and through. At the high school, I had 2 state championship runs with freshmen helping carry the weight. It wasn't popular, but it's all I know. And that, that's a South Lakes thing as well. So, Coach Byrd and that whole experience absolutely had a giant effect on me. And while my kids, think this is all baseball stuff, I'm essentially trying to recreate that vibe, that feeling in my gym that, we had going through South Lakes.
So Troy, I could assume you enjoy the one-on-one training more than coaching a team.
I do coach teams just because I don't like leaving my work in the hands of other coaches.
Mhm.
Arrogantly. I spend as much time on my training craft as somebody would if they're a doctor or whatever. And that's not the case in our coaching field in baseball. So I do coach, but primarily it's the one-on-one training.
Mhm. It's just amazing how that's blown up. There was no one-on-one basketball trainings when we were playing. Now,
Right.
I mean, they're everywhere, and it's a very lucrative and very effective business. Lonsdale, why don't you wrap this up? So what did basketball mean to you? How far did you go? And what are you up to these days?
So South Lakes basketball absolutely meant the world to me. It just it definitely gave me the foundation and focus of how I wanted to be in life, live my life. One thing about Coach Byrd that I could truly say, he gave me the confidence. When we stepped on the court, off the court, just always admired how he carried himself, and we were never scared ever, regardless of where we played at, what situation we were in. We just always had that. It's not even being cocky; it's just having that confidence. To step on the court and do your job and perform. But when I went to college, I went to Central Florida Community College down there with Bobby Huntley. Had a really good junior college career. Graduated after 2 years. I went to go play Division II at a really small school called Francis Marion University in Florence, South Carolina.
Mhm.
Had a pretty good career there too. And got my degree. So it was mission accomplished for me. First one in my family. So that was a
That's
huge
awesome.
deal. I'm not coaching, not really doing anything with basketball, which I wish I had the time. I work in sales, and I have my own business. So I'm pretty busy right now. But in the future, I do wish, hopefully, if I have the time, I want to get back out there, give back to the kids. I have 2 young nephews, and they're going to be basketball players, obviously. So I'm really excited about the possibilities.
Yeah, that's great, Lonsdale. It's been great reconnecting. So there, one of my favorite movies is Hoosiers, and there's that line when she's talking to Gene Hackman. She's saying, why are these guys? They still talk about these games 20 years later. Why do they mean so much? And Gene Hackman says, some people would die to be a king for 15 minutes or something like that. And, you guys were part of something very special. You guys were great players. You guys are part of a great program. And, people can't take that away from you. I love basketball. And I think one of the reasons why I coached, officiated, and did all that is because I didn't have a career you guys had. I played at Robinson. I did my best. I was a pretty good player. But you guys can really be proud of what you guys accomplished on the court. And I was there. I saw you guys do your thing. I was always cheering for you because you guys were, generally representing our region at state. And so anyway, I just want to thank you guys for doing this. Hopefully we can do other types of podcasts in the future, like maybe we did a Final Four with Quinn and the West Springfield and Shane. So we can do other types of combinations and stuff. But I would love to get you guys on again because you guys are, all great storytellers.
Thank you for having us, and to be able to reconnect with these guys has actually made my day. And just thinking about all the stories, God, do we have stories? Not meant for this podcast, but yeah, I can't prove it, man. There's just so much that happened that it just made me laugh today. But thank you for putting it together.
Oh,
yeah, Julian. Hey, everyone, I put my cell in the chat. So y'all lock me in, please, and stay in touch. Julian, yes, I please, you got my information. My number's in the chat. I'd love to talk to you from a business perspective or continue to go 100 miles an hour down memory lane. Cause man, I hadn't done this for a while. I need to let my kids listen to it so that, I can confirm that, their pops was something at one point in his life.
That was that dude back in the day.
He was that dude back in the day, but man, I miss you guys, y'all.
Kids, man.
Yeah.
What's that?
I need to meet your kids. and I need to sit down and talk to him, and I'm gonna give him the real about it. Pops was #1 nationwide Gatorade Player of the Year.
Let's
Your
go.
name is gonna
Let's
ring
go.
forever, my brother.
Let's go, my man. I appreciate
your
it.
name will ring forever. So let's
I
make
appreciate it, brother.
put
I do.
respect on that.
I do. I appreciate it, man. I do. No, it was, man, this was fun, yo. And I want to, like I said, man, it's funny, you know, mid 40s, you know, I'm reaching the top of the mountain, and then it's going downhill, and I'm realizing very quickly what's important and what's not. You know what I mean? Community, spirit, love, you know, friendship, that's family. That's what it's all about for me. So I will absolutely continue to stay in touch with you guys, and would love to, you know, stay connected, y'all. And I don't get on the social that much, but like I said, I like talking to people directly. My phone line's always open, man. So Rob, I'm gonna call you, dude. We gotta catch up, man.
Yeah, link up.
Yes, sir. Troy, you as well. BA, man,
Yes, sir.
you come to Atlanta, man. Seriously, hit me up, dude. Love to
You
catch
got
up.
it. You got
Yes,
it.
sir. All
Hey,
right.
Julian. Hey, I want to know
All right.
you, Brian. I don't know if Daryl even told you this, but you know, my podcast is about to kick off also. I was wondering if I can use this podcast as maybe a kickoff.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so you know, and I'll get in contact with you guys also about the cybersecurity stuff.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
whatever I can do to help, man. So
Investment side, but you know, we making some moves here, so I love.
Let's go. Yeah, let's go, man.
yeah.
Well, it's man, it's been a real treat, Julian. Thank you,
Yeah.
so much for
Great
putting
meeting you,
this
Joey. I
together.
watched you play so many times, man. You always were, you know, a great player, and so I'm glad I finally got a chance to meet you.
You
I
didn't
appreciate
realize
it.
he was the clown that he is, did you?
Yeah, I really did, because you know,
Once
Joey,
again, you
take it the
can't
wrong
prove
way.
it.
You went to Duke when it became the most infamous time to go to Duke, because that was the time when people began to hate Duke. We didn't hate Duke in
Yeah.
the 80s. But
Yeah.
then, you know, with Brian Davis and Leitner
Christian
and
Leitner.
Duke
Yes, sir.
Duke started winning everything, and then you went and
Yeah.
joined them. You
Yeah.
know, so but no, I didn't take it that far. So,
That's all good. Well, yeah, I was one of those guys who hated him for a while as well. But then, you know what? It's like it's you know, what's the use of looking in the rear view, man? That's your
Water
brand.
under the bridge.
There's water under the bridge. I tell you, you know, I had some really good seats for a lot of those games. So, and you know what? I'll wrap it on this. But you know, when I was kind of, you know, a couple months in, when things were kind of at the peak and they were hard, Irv and Wendell, you know, both came down to visit, and
Is that right?
you know,
That's
just
awesome.
not for nothing else than to just check on me, you know, and that's, you know, that's deep rooted love right there.
Family.
And always remember that meal at Applebee's. I don't think I wasn't getting that. I wasn't getting that. Yeah, I wasn't getting the kickbacks like some of the other guys on the team. So I was getting my little 20 piece. So I had to take them to Applebee's.
yes, gotta score more points. Yeah.
That's it.
That's
All
funny.
right, T. Hey,
All right,
Dale,
fellas.
you be good, Lonsdale, man. It's been a long time, dude. Like I said, my cell's in the chat, man. Lock me in. Call me, please. Anyone.
Okay, we sure
Yeah,
will,
dude.
man.
Take care, John.
All
Bye,
right, guys, have a good evening.
Bye,
We'll
y'all.
see
Be
y'all.
well.
Have a good one.
Seahawks.
Oh,